Hello and welcome back to another episode of Track Talk. Today I am joined by a new guy, Turner Wise. How you doing, dude?
Doing great. How about you, man?
I'm peachy. Turner came onto the scene recently with two tracks released in pretty quick succession, actually. Both of them have been very unique, so I've been eagerly awaiting this chance to speak to him. So, Turner, I think we'll start with Victory. How did this track come about? Like, what inspired the style?
Well, I've always kind of enjoyed Two Steps from Hell. They produce a lot of stuff that's like movie trailers.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
same, yeah.
yeah, and so like the music is always like just super huge. The rhythms are not overly complex, and I wanted to pick something for my first track that's like big, epic, easy to transcribe, meaning sync. When I say transcribe, I really mean sync. In the music world, transcribe just means you're listening to the music and you're writing down the rhythm that's you hear.
Mhm.
So it's really easy to like hear all the rhythms in this song, and it's just big. It's got a catchy melody in the middle. So that's kind of like when I heard the track, I'm like, okay, it's not like I like love this track more than any other track. It's just kind of, I listen to the elements in the music and I'm like, okay, well, this seems like it would be a good first track for me to try out.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned wanting to hit those big notes and like the grandness of the music. So, is that a theme that you tried to like really run with throughout the track? Like, what did you do to evoke that?
Well, I thought of like the little guy, like the zoom on this one is really out. And
Yeah.
so I'm just thinking like little Bosch in this like grand world of this like floating epic like kingdom is kind of what I was trying to
Yes. Yeah.
convey.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have a very Two Steps from Hell feel. The track is kind of ethereal and also like grandiose. Like, I also enjoyed the way you use that zoom because it does give you that sense of scale. But
Yeah, and to be
yeah,
honest, the scale was not intentional. Like I have no during like my tracks are snapshots in time, and once they're completed, I don't touch them again. And so like this track is definitely my first track. You can tell by the camera up in the right hand corner. Like people roasted me for that,
oh, that's
but
not
like
that bad. Like, God, some of my first tracks I used Bandicam to record it, so it just said like Bandicam in like massive letters at the top. So
screencast-o-matic.
oh yeah, like you're doing fine. Don't worry.
Yeah. So I knew what the like for instance, you can tell again here.
uh,
So here is an example of a really cool concept, but I didn't know how to play with Zoom, right? It's
yeah.
this like giant woman built in rock,
Oh.
and this is supposed to be a violin, and here's the bow
So
coming
this was
across.
something I was going to ask you because there's another point in the track where it looks like you made like something like a violin or like a guitar or something out of this rock formation.
So this is a series of four violins, actually.
Right.
So here's like a rock just like suspended in a tree, like growing out of the tree or out of the rock. And then
Yeah.
the tree branches are the actual strings to the violin.
Oh, that's
But
so
this
cool.
this little like part right here is actually synced to the melody.
Yeah. That's like a really interesting thing that I haven't really come across before. I mean, I only really twigged it when I saw the end, and I was like, "Wait, isn't that like an instrument or something? Like this is something that quite unique artistically. I don't think I mean, I'm guys watching this, correct me in the comments below, but I don't think we've ever seen an approach to art and music that's actually linked instruments in a scenic way, or at least in quite such a way as this. So yeah, that was something that really struck me about this track.
If that strikes you, you'll like my next track because we'll get to it. But yeah, it has a lot of, well, yeah. So this first one, like I was just thinking, okay, this kingdom of Bosch going through, it's this big epic kingdom, but later in the music, it kind of like rips apart the kingdom. You know what I mean? And so I was thinking, okay, what would an instrument that's built in rock but like in disarray look like?
Yeah.
And so we go to this next one. This one's like even more torn apart, but it's got like a waterfall coming down it.
Oh yeah.
If you look up at the top, it's actually the part that's dislodged from like the top of the like it's pulled up here. I'm really proud of this thing. This is like the tree that like fits in where you put your cheek on, and then it's like growing through the rock. But that's
I see. Yes. Yeah, that's nice.
And then I'm really okay. Two things about this. Number one, I'm terrible at faces, so I'm sort of glad I didn't know how to do zoom.
Okay. So this is a face.
This is a face, and it's like blowing in the trees, I guess. And this is like wind, kind of, but it's in the shape of a violin. If you look at it, and this piece, which is the melody, is coming up. It's like a bow to the violin. And then if you continue down, it's like he's going down the string.
Very nice.
Then it goes into just epic jumps.
Yeah, and this is interesting because in a sense you didn't have that much physically going on to match the music, but the scenery and the atmosphere you created just worked so well. I mean, one of the other people I can think of, I guess, that kind of uses fairly like normal, I guess, style compared to like the kind of exotic things you tend to see in the community. The only other person I can really think of is a guy called Mr. Doodle Noodle, who would kind of use like more electro and trancey type musics, but he would set them to this kind of dreamlike landscape, and it somehow worked. And like you're like another guy who's kind of managed to do that, so I commend you.
I appreciate it because I have no art background, so
your art is something we should get into, honestly, because you have a kind of a distinctive style. You use like the half line sizes, I guess, for a lot of your stuff, or you make it look like you do.
Actually, this whole video I did not know about different line sizes, so It's all done with one. So like, okay, here's a good thing. So you can draw these rocks, but then with the eraser tool you can kind of take the edge off of these rocks and make it feel like a lot more. Like, here's a good example of like this little part right here where you take off the corners of the rock with the eraser tool. But it makes it right here again. It makes it feel a lot more like hand drawn.
Yeah.
I did it all with a mouse. It's not like I'm actually like drawing it with my hand, but
yeah, I mean, it looks like you drew it with a tablet pen or something. Like, it's really very hand drawn. It's nice.
Yeah. Anyway, I just enjoy, like, if the music tells me that it needs to be hand drawn, I want to make it look as like authentic as possible. This music doesn't make any sense to have like super clean edges, 90-degree, corner.
Yeah. This music has kind of history to it, and you've kind of put history into the track, which is nice. So, one of the things, I guess, I mean, we've covered quite a lot on this track already, but when we talk about syncing, How does that come into play in this track?
Um, well, definitely the part that sinks the most is the melody here, and we've kind of touched on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Boom bop, that boom bop are those two rocks there. Actually,
Yeah.
you can hear it in the music.
I don't think the music actually comes through, which is annoying. But yeah, no worries.
Okay, one sec. I'll sing it. My terrible voice in the morning.
Hey, you'll be the second person to sing one of their parts live on the air, so.
Dun 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 da dun gun gun dum boom ba da do 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 da 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 boo do 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 do
Alright, nice. So
So
yeah,
anyway, yeah, that's kind of the process of like getting it in my mind, and I'll listen to it like 10 times before I start it, and then I try to it helps that I actually have a degree in music, and so I have a lot of history of like transcribing.
yeah,
So like things that may take other people who have no history in music like a long time to sink. It's like I can listen to something, once or twice and be able to get that rhythm down.
nice. It's a good skill to have, especially in line writer these days. Music is everything.
Yeah, I think in terms of syncing at the beginning, it's actually kind of I wish I would have made it more clear, because you have the bass drum, like the big drum on the bottom. Doom ga, a doom doom ga, doom ga, doom doom.
Yeah, that's one of the things you tend to learn with syncing. It's one thing to be able to hit the notes, it's another to make it look like you hit the notes. Even if you hit
Yeah,
them, sometimes if Bosch does not move in a certain way, then you really have to emphasize things.
yeah, and if so here, if listeners are willing to actually watch, but this is the up here are rocks, and these are the violin parts. There's a little part that goes bum 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 bum. It's actually
Ah,
up here, but again, my line writer skill was not great, and these don't necessarily line up exactly with it, but that was kind of the idea of it.
huh. Cool idea, to be honest. So, is there anything we've missed out in this track that you feel should be talked about?
Uh, no, I mean, I don't know how you are, but when I do something and then like two tracks later, I look back, I don't know, like, oh my gosh, this thing is like, this thing is janky. Like, I feel that way already after like 3 or 4 weeks of Line Rider. I mean, I
Mm.
feel that way on my second track. You know what I mean? Like, there's so much. The thing about this game is like, the more tools you have, the more you can really make a song work.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, there
And that,
are insane lengths that people in this community go to achieve that, and you're starting to dip your foot in, so to speak, and see how deep the rabbit hole really goes on this. It's pretty crazy. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned things that you're looking back and not liking. So sure, why not point out some of the stuff that really bothers you now?
The zoom, we've already talked about the zoom. Some
Mm.
of the syncing things, like even in my next track, I was still playing with, okay, I can play like on drums or I can play like the parts um, out in real life and sync them and be able to play them, and you would be able to tell that that's the song. But in Line Rider, it I have to you almost have to guess where your audience is going to be looking. Are they going to be looking at
Mm.
the scenery, or are they going to be looking at Bosch? Because I hear a lot of people that are creating tracks that they do strictly lines and lines only. Well, yeah, it makes sense to sync the lines to Bosch. But if you have scenery that's interesting, people's eyes are going to be pulled off Bosch.
Mm. I
And when
mean,
they
yeah, go
start
ahead.
focusing on the scenery, if it's synced to Bosch, it's going to be out of sync.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that you've actually struck a pretty good balance here. I mean, you have scenery, but it's not like overly crazy. You're not taking up, like the entire canvas, so to speak. I mean, if you want to see more on what I mean, just go back through some of the scenery tracks of several years ago. A good example would be Breathtaking Silence, where it's just insane scenery that just like you aren't even really looking at Bosch at that point. It's more like watching Bosch move through an art gallery to with music in the background. So yeah, you're right. You definitely have to kind of strike a balance for your creation to be effective.
That's what I'm struggling with on my third one, is finding a balance of, okay, I've literally watched through my third video, you know, 30 times to make sure that it's like, okay, enough of that or enough of this, like give it a break and let him ride a line for a little.
Yeah, I mean, one of the other things that can also be tricky is when you in LRA, if you're looking at the same sync again and again and again and again, is to make sure you go back and then watch it in the context of everything else, because you can easily kind of lose yourself.
All these trees are copy pasted. I'm not going to lie.
Oh yeah, we can tell, but hey, like
But at
there's
that
no
point, it's
points.
like,
You don't win any points for like hand drawing every tree. So
yeah, I think if I had it over to do again, I'd probably um, draw something maybe in the later points of like, how cool would it be to have like a giant stone Bosch that's like falling apart, stuff like
that
that.
would be actually very epic. Just covered in vines and chains or something.
Yeah,
Chained to his sled.
that'd be
Uh,
pretty cool. Anyway, yeah, I mean it. I'm proud of it for being my first track, but there's definitely like stuff that I could. Some people said that this stuff was unfinished, like this is unfinished. And I didn't really view it that way, because in my mind, I was thinking this giant floating kingdom that Bosch was
mm,
like what if this is not floating, or like this is floating, this is clearly floating,
oh yeah.
right? And so it doesn't mean anything for me to like waste all my time. And what are like these are not unfinished, these are actually floating and they're actually part of the
Yeah.
music.
It's funny actually. The style for this actually reminds me of some of the levels in another game called Trials Evolutions. I don't know if you've ever played that, but there's a lot of kind of abstract sections that are kind of designed almost exactly with the style you've used here, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, um I think when you box yourself in to certain physics or scenery, then you lose your ability to draw a bunch of like cool stuff, you know what I
Mm, yeah, totally. I mean, also like minimalist scenery tracks are often some of the more appreciated ones. I mean, people can go back and forth on this kind of stuff all day, but I mean, yeah. I mean, I tend to agree with the viewpoint that more minimalist scenery tends to be more effective. One of the things people always say when you're getting into scenery as well is consider that what you're making, depending on your speed, is only going to be in frame for like a quarter of a second or less, or maybe only a couple of frames. So,
I
yeah.
know. I'm dealing with that now. Like I want to put so much detail, but I just at some point like okay, I'm drawing this giant accordion for my third video,
Mm.
and uh I could go like accordions can be so detailed,
Oh,
but it's
yes.
only in the frame for like you said, only at like a split second. And so I just have to make sure that the audience knows that it's an accordion. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah, yeah. I mean, of course, you can always cheat these days with the technology we have. You can literally just put a picture of an accordion into Line Rider using Ollie MBM's program. You can just literally have it drawn for you if you're that lazy. But yeah.
I'm not sure it works on Mac.
Oh, that's a good point. I'd have to ask Ollie about that.
Because I use a Mac just simply because it's my work computer, and I take it to I take my laptop around with me, and if I have 15 minutes of time,
Oh
I
yeah,
go knock out this little section.
oh yeah, for sure, totally. I mean, to be honest, it amazes me you have the time to do this whilst being a teacher. Being a teacher is a pretty hectic job. Yeah, I guess we will move on to Come Alive. So this one really struck me a lot. The I'm just gonna go and ask like straight away, how did you do the I don't know what the technical term for that is, the sound waves.
That's a good question. Okay, so the first thing I did was I drew this line here. Okay, and
Yeah.
then the second thing I did was, as he's going, I as it's playing, I click the little pencil tool, and above him, I draw when I hear the sound.
Yeah.
Then I draw the one set of lines like this. Then I highlight them, copy paste, and then I just shift them over, and it starts making like different. It'll make these darker ones appear in different places.
Yeah.
And I actually did it better later.
Yeah. So you did the dotted section first, you're saying?
Yeah, the dotted section isn't really synced
Yeah.
at the beginning. This one, it's spaced in a way that it can trick your brain into thinking it's the eighth note.
Yeah.
But these waves down here are actually better than the waves that I started at, and I wasn't willing to go back and because you could actually see like the dark parts. There's like cool little dark parts in them.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, you just with 0.5 pencil, not the pencil but the line. I just drew a set of lines. Then I copy pasted the lines and then shifted them and shrunk them and until they made those waves in the actual sound.
So you did a lot of manual work to make this, which I find impressive. I mean, this is the kind of thing these days that we could probably show you a pretty quick way of doing this. But yeah, like that, you went through some suffering to make that, so kudos. But yeah, I should probably start with how did this track begin? Like, what was the history of this track? Because this is very different from the previous one.
Yeah, this is actually a sub requested track. So I produced my first one and I got like 12 subs or so. And one of the subs mentioned that he wanted me to do this track. And so I did it.
Simple, but nice.
So I had no prior knowledge of this track before I did it.
Yeah. And so how does this differ in terms of theme? I mean, previously you had the kind of swelling grand themes with the Two Steps from Hell track. And this one, like, there's a lot of stuff where you just match the music, which has been done by previous people, but not to like the level that you've done it here. Like, people have never really just made literal like sound waves that you would kind of like audio waves that you would just recognize from looking at like Audacity or something. So I found this kind of interesting. Like, what made you want to use like that in particular?
Yeah, so I went to SoundCloud and listened to it, and as I
Mm.
was listening to it, I saw the little lines next to the track, and I'm like, oh, hey, that would be kind of cool to put in the video.
Yeah, it's funny actually.
Literally,
Yeah, go on.
I I almost drove myself crazy because I put the track into Audacity.
Yeah.
I put the track into Audacity, and I was trying to sync it like by the 40, the 40 tick,
Yeah.
and actually have like more detail in those sound waves. And after like an hour and a half of trying to time it out, I was just like, no, screw it.
Yeah.
I don't want to make my tracks last longer than like a 2 week wait period.
Hmm.
Just because I feel like every 2 weeks, like there can be, and maybe I'll probably reduce down to like once a month.
Yeah.
When I,
Like, the more you get into this, the more time these things will take.
but like I feel like it's taking forever. But then I look at when I publish my videos, and I'm like, oh wow, okay, I feel like I pumped these two out, I cranked these two out like.
Yeah. You can really get in the zone, especially, I mean, because also you're a newer guy. You have that like intense hunger to just continuously make tracks. So yeah, I mean, you'll probably be able to like keep that pace going. But I mean, it depends what you move on to. Really, like some ideas do just are just a massive grind, even if you have like a lot of time. But yeah, so you've mentioned how you made the barcode. Not the barcode, sorry, the sound wave. But what about syncing? I mean, is this just mostly a scenery sync track, or do you have physical syncs as well?
um some of some of the falls are synced. Actually, one of the things that I wish I had done is sync. uh there's a really this part at the beginning is not synced. um
Yeah.
so we have this dun 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 dun
What
dun.
actually are those? Because, I mean, to an uneducated guy like me, they look like pencil erasers.
Yeah, so if you look on a soundboard,
Sharpeners, even.
these are like volume
Oh, right.
volume.
Oh, okay, yeah, I see what you mean now. Yeah. That's pretty cool.
These are like knob. I thought these were like little knobs. So he's like going down, adjusting the soundboard. When I first did this, I literally drew a giant soundboard all the way down with like
Oh, God.
a, a slider, 3 buttons, and then these were like there's like 4 dials up here. And I showed my wife, and she's like, "Yeah, that's too crazy. You have to erase that."
Yeah. At least you get that good feedback, though.
That's when I kind of like I was like, well, I want to kind of you have that bum 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 ba da dum over the top,
Hmm.
and I liked the swell of the triangles are awesome for swells.
Huh.
Ba da dum bum 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 ba dum bum 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 boo doo doo. And actually, you can hear the melody going into this fill here, so that's why there's like a triangle going into the bass drop.
Can I ask, what method did you use to fill in that? Did you fill that in with like 3 times lines, or did you use 25?
You can actually see in this picture if you look really
Yeah, I
closely.
see the seams.
I like did the lines and then I copy paste.
Ah, you did them in bunches. Okay, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
And actually, I didn't know about rotate at that point.
Oh, yeah, I think I told you about
And
that yesterday only, I think. So, yeah.
yeah, so I was dragging and flipping and making things in awkward positions,
Oh.
and then the line count got ridiculous.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that can be the bane of some lesser PCs when it comes to line rudder tracks.
I can't remember what it was, but I was doing. It was actually a blessing in disguise because I was doing the sound waves later.
Mm.
These sound waves actually have a lower count than the sound waves at the beginning. But when I was copy pasting and dragging the ones from earlier, it made like there were times where I made a mistake and I had multiple lines stacked, and it was
Oh.
just lagging so hard. Like it was lagging so bad that I had to like give up like 800 changes just to like get back to a track that wouldn't lag.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, we've all been there.
Yeah, but after I drew these lines, I went in and erased like the middle of the sound, because like if you know, like I'm clicking and it's making a line that goes this way, and then I drew the thing, and then I like zoomed in real close and like erased the thing, so it makes it look like I just drew a bunch of lines, hand drawn. I like getting rid of evidence of how I did things.
Yeah, totally. Gotta have a bit of mystery. So, would you say then the theme? I mean, obviously this song is called "Coming Alive," but you've kind of made some of the more technical aspects that we might see on like a music file come alive. So is that the theme here, just to like visualize music literally?
Yeah, I mean, I think my tracks kind of evolve in my own brain as I go along, and most of that is my inability to actually depict what I'm. My original goal with this was that this heart would literally become like an anatomically correct heart, that I would like it would go from like this technology thing in like fuse into like a real heart at the end. But then I tried to draw it and it was so bad.
Well, I mean, the one you drew is still pretty cool, to be honest.
And then after that, it was just kind of like, okay, I'm gonna have like different parts of the sound, like when, like this part down here is the girl's voice, and every time she does it, it comes into play, and you don't realize it, but in your mind, like you're like, oh, I've heard this before, oh, I've seen this before. So it makes a connection in your brain to make a seamless track. So again, the melody is synced up at the top. Bum, 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 again, the girl's voice comes in, and so it's that like I'll release the hold of you.
Okay,
and it comes in here. Bum, 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 the hold of you. This part right here was challenging because I wanted to do the same. There's a little snare, but the Bosch was traveling at a different speed than he was earlier, and so I couldn't reuse what I had done for the snare. Because if you remember, the snare fill before were these triangles underneath.
Yeah.
But he's traveling much, much faster here than here. So that's kind of why I looked up the quote.
Yeah, and where does this quote come from?
Jane Austen.
Oh, really? Interesting.
And I'm not creative with fonts. I just Google interesting fonts.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I had to pick a font that going this speed would be readable, but
Yeah.
also fit the style. And I don't know if I got it right, but it was a lot better than a lot of the other fonts I had written out.
Oh yeah. I mean, to me, like, I'm not really like super fast when it comes to fonts. We do have some font aficionados in the community who will probably leave their thoughts below. But like to the average viewer, like I'm sure it doesn't really matter.
As long as it fits the style of the music,
Yeah, exactly.
and you know, um, I think it was you that mentioned this bass drop feeling empty, and I think a little bit of that was like track burnout.
That's
If I had it
definitely
all over to do again, this right here would be solid black, and this would be solid black.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting technique because what it does is kind of an illusion. I've done this in one of my tracks where I used black in that kind of way. It almost looks like a zoom out or a zoom in, even though it's not. Even though like the camera doesn't move, it's quite an interesting optical effect.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is I don't. Again, if this is a snapshot in time of my skill in Line Writer, I didn't know about zoom here. So if I had it all over to do again, I would actually build the zoom here slowly, gradually getting in,
Yeah.
zooming in, zooming in, zooming in. Yeah,
What was the kind of sand dust section we just saw for a brief instant?
so there's like this electronic sound. It's not any specific pitch that's in the music. If you watch it, you're like, that's the sound. I cannot sing it.
Yeah, so viewers, go to 757 and watch that for yourself. 257, sorry.
And actually, this was another error when I was making this, because what I originally wanted to do was what you can see it kind of here is you have like 0.5 pencil dots here. You have like 1 pencil dots, and then I was going to 1 to 2 to 3, and it was like 3 here.
Yeah.
But it was so overwhelming to your eyes that I ended up and the error was I had somehow broken my track like 4 or 5 times. I was like super tired at this point. And I somehow broke my track 3 times doing these stupid dots.
Yeah. Did you?
So then I was like,
made them out of 1 instead of 3. That could have happened.
Yeah. And I was copy pasting, so maybe I grabbed something. But then you have all these like tiny little dots, and you don't. Yeah, it's just kind of.
Yeah, it almost reminds me of like those like massive scale shots of like universes in the distance, where you can just see stars like shrinking into the distance. It's quite a cool effect.
Yeah, I like it. I think I'll probably use it in the future. It's basically like I copy pasted, but then I went over it just randomly with an eraser.
Yeah.
So those dots are just like kind of randomly there.
Yeah.
The sound is like almost like information going through like an electrical, what you would think.
Yeah, it's cool. So yeah, then we have quite a lot of these interesting syncing techniques, which I think is where some people have kind of likened you to another new guy, Kata. So this one specifically, for example, is kind of out there. Like, what made you design it with the kind of like almost porcupine-y effect?
Yeah, This is, again, I'm thinking electric,
Hmm.
but we're moving at a rate that's super quick. So I don't like if you stop it, it looks like a porcupine.
Oh
But if
yeah.
it's going full speed, it looks like something's like sparking off of him. And I also got it with Bosch like spinning around at this point, and the music, the sound of it is like zing, and
Hmm.
so I wanted it almost to be like these rays like shooting off of Bosch.
All right. Yeah. Let's see that.
Zing!
Ah yeah. Nice.
And then this one again, I want to. I'm sorry. I want to sync. It's like. So you kind of get in your mind this idea of like going from big to small.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's nice.
But also, I tried to sync each of these little lines. I wanted to sync with some form of the music. So, like, you have the shape, but you also make sure that the lines are fitting with the music. It's not distracting to the music.
Oh yeah. Totally.
This section's crazy, and to be honest, I don't think I had the technical skill to do it completely how I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
I was originally imagining like a quirk track for this section, but I like how it turned out. And now that I'm on the other end of it, I'm glad that I didn't do quirk track, because it would have taken me like an extra 10 hours to 20 hours to like just learn some tricks.
Yeah. And yeah, often this stuff can be done more simply than people realize.
Yep. Yeah, the back end was I want something clean, and then there's like this. It's just like a pretty basic beat. Boom, cat, boom, boom, cat, boom,
Yeah.
cat, and then it comes up, and there's a fill, and then I switch it so that instead of the black on the bass, it's now the snare, and then I use the sound wave from earlier to tie it in, and now the sound wave is the bass drum. So
Okay.
terrible beatboxing here again. Boom, cat, boom, 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 cat, boom, cat, boom, boom, cat, boom, boom, cat, boom, cat, boom, 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 cat, boom, cat, boom, boom, cat. Anyway, it's just like a different section, so I changed it up there. That's what I did with that.
Sweet. So yeah, do you have any other sections you think we should cover?
I don't think so. There's not really any other sections. The only other technique is pretty self-explanatory with a lot of line writers is this part.
Yeah.
So I saw that on Saley, obviously.
You know. Yeah, that's something I was also going to ask. A lot of these methods you used here kind of remind me a little bit of Saley or a tiny bit of Mountain King at times.
Yeah, those are two tracks that I watch and I show to my students. So,
yeah,
I mean, hopefully it stands alone on its own without feeling like a copycat.
I don't know. It's definitely a unique track. I mean, most tracks are like a lot of the time they're heavily inspired by others. But yeah, like this is definitely inspired. It definitely doesn't feel like a copy.
That's good. I appreciate that. And then, yeah, the heart at the end.
Sweet. So, I mean, I guess this will cover this track, unless you have anything that you dislike that you'd like to go back and point out.
No, just the zoom and that bass drop. If I had it, like I said, if I had it over to do it again, I would really zoom in on him, and then when it goes into that crazy section, the breakdown section, just like zoom out.
Yeah.
Or keep it zoomed in, because it's like this super huge epic. I don't know. If I had it over to do again, I'd probably go back and just like play around with the zoom there and see what effect that would have.
Yeah, totally. And one thing I noticed that's a little different from some of the creators, you've worked in a little like, share, subscribe directly into the tracks. So props for that.
Yeah, I don't know if it's in. There we go. I don't know if it's like gonna be a thing that I do, but in my last video, I'm already kind of like I'm 30 seconds out of the finish, at least on laying track, and so I'm kind of trying to figure out how I can get him. There's a very unique thing that I've drawn at the beginning that I think I want to put at the end for the like, share, subscribe, and they also make good thumbnails.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, very nice. So yeah, I guess that will conclude this episode of Track Talk. Turner has volunteered to rejoin us for Behind the Lines, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for joining us, dude, and we will see you guys next time.